I had always been fond of murder mysteries. It's the kind of experience where you get to play the detective, solving these gruesome murders, traversing through clues that are full of symbolism, constructing theories, finding the perpetrator, and uncovering their motives. Visual novels I played before, like Koro no Shoujo, has perfected this formula, albeit in a darker rendition. So coming into Umineko, I thought I knew what I was getting myself into. A series of murders on a secluded island. Maybe a little convoluted mystery to throw off the readers, but nonetheless one that's sensible and can be understood from logical deduction. And that's where I'm wrong, but more on that later. Umineko is an interesting experience, one that has me questioning every line of dialogue as if it's a federal investigation. And as I'm making this video, I'm only halfway through the game, but beyond the thematic murder mystery that we are subjected to, tells an underlying story that's very human. It discusses themes of desire, greed, grief, and love. It delves into the dichotomy of truth and perspective, along with moral corruption that is portrayed through an imperfect world and family drama. For those who haven't read the visual novel, Umineko is set on an isolated island, the events of which spans a couple days. On this island, Rokkenjima, lies the estate of the head family of the Ushiromiyas. There is an annual conference that happens on Rokkenjima pertaining to the inheritance of the family head, Kinzo, who is rumored to pass away. However, on this particular conference holds an epitaph detailing the location of Kinzo's hidden gold. By authority of his decree, whoever uncovers the gold will have rights to succeed the Ushiromiya headship. But it all takes a horrifying turn after several murders had occurred, graffitied by the blood of its victims. Symbolism of the occult etched onto the walls accompanied the crime scenes. Here, our characters find themselves in the middle of some depraved ritual. Traversing through the hellscape that is Umineko, I found myself playing the role of detective, gone through so many emotions, and invested myself into the dilemma of our characters that go even beyond the murders itself. What I initially thought could have been solved through rationale turned out to be something else entirely, so much so that it becomes unintentionally comical. Umineko does this thing where it makes you feel smart for 5 seconds, then immediately slaps your confidence into the ocean. Once I think I've connected the dots, our goat in which Beatrice does some string pulling and cackles at you like you're a laughingstock. Every theory I've ever constructed, the logical conclusions I've come to, following the reasoning of our protagonist, this visual novel twists everything on its head, providing new perspective that convolutes the mystery further. There's just so many twists and turns that any logical conclusions or tinfoil hat theories I came up with, I had to discard, ultimately finding myself defeated and on my knees. This visual novel has effectively made me so hyper-aware I'm reading through the lines, trying to find any deeper meaning, rereading past dialogue, checking the epitaph and character bios constantly so I don't miss anything. At some point, I started to suspect a character just because of some minuscule piece of dialogue that I thought was important, only to find out that character dies in front of my eyes. Like, I kid you not. This character did some 500 IQ play by using a folded receipt in order to deduce whether or not a certain character had opened a door in order to leave a closed room. This quite literally was just a point of contention for our characters that I drilled into. Why would anyone ever think to fold some random receipt to keep tabs on someone and not be suspicious? This character had set this up before the events of the murder. Why would you think to do that if you were not going to commit something heinous? These were the thoughts that came to me, but of course it ended up being a red herring, and I'm not even sure if it was intentional. It's the sort of mental gymnastics and the evidence presented to us by the game that makes this visual novel so frustrating, yet hilarious. Every revelation that arises, this VN makes me question and doubt it. Furthermore, each episode reframes our understanding of the murders, rules, and shines the spotlight on different characters, providing new perspectives and their dynamic with the rest of the cast. Sometimes it's the silent cries of a wife whose efforts have gone unnoticed. Sometimes it's the imperfect hardship of parenting and the relationship with their children. For others, it's the struggle of a person's self-worth and whether true love exists for them, and many more perspectives. Beyond the mystery, Umineko had a way to invest me emotionally. It made me laugh, fearful, inquisitive, happy, and sad all throughout its runtime. These emotions were possible because of the way the visual novel explores the characters' unique circumstances and the themes they accompany. For the first time in a while, I had shed tears upon uncovering the truth behind certain characters and why they act the way they do. These narratives were beautiful yet tragic. At one point, I found myself caught in between a rock and a hard place because there were uncomfortable truths that arised. For example, there's a particular character I have sympathy for and even found myself deeply attached to. And yet, the more I learn about them, the more I had to come to terms that they're flawed, that they're not entirely a good person. I ended up in a sparring match against myself, where I had to constantly justify their actions while also calling them out for it. It truly was a polarizing experience, but it only further strengthened my love for this character. I could not accept the unforgivable things they've done, but I also held out hope and wanted to see them succeed, and I loved when I got to see their vulnerable side. And all of those emotions, contradictions, and revelations led me to recognize the bigger picture, the themes that Umineko weaves throughout the story. Umineko, much more than a murder mystery, is a story that portrays the human condition, our worldly desires, adversity, and truth. Umineko is laced with family politics and drama. The annual conference on Rokkenjima pronounces this dynamic, pitting what should be close relatives against each other. It's like the battle of the wits. Combine this with a murder mystery, you get an interesting case study in the desire for material wealth and the desperate actions that stem from self-preservation. The Ushiromiya family dynamic is one of the many contentious points of the narrative and gives insight on certain themes. These themes range from the role of men and women, especially in a patriarchal order, the idea of pure-blooded hierarchies, free will versus familial legacy, trauma, greed, and the meaning of love. Seeing this dynamic play out, especially due part to the politics that unfold during the game, gives an insight to whether our characters value wealth and prestige over the very connection that define them. It's an interesting perspective in seeing how the desire for headship brings out the worst to those who should be close. It's like seeing vultures circling their prey, fighting over who has rights to snatch it up for themselves. It's almost like a zero-sum game. And really, it's not entirely out of greed, though it is a significant factor. But it's also due to desperation, and for specific characters, envy. Some characters are motivated by failed ventures and find themselves in a financial hole. Some harbor resentment over those more fortunate, and others want to cling onto their position in the family hierarchy. All of it is enough to make a compelling case for each character, giving a rich array of perspectives we follow throughout the game. The question of whether our characters are consumed by such worldly desires or resist and show their humanity in spite of such conditions is what I ultimately think Umineko wants to answer, or at the very least, touch upon. Another aspect from the visual novel pertaining to the murders that take place throughout the game is how our characters react. Like many narratives that revolve around death games, we're given an opportunity to see the morality and rationale of our characters in the face of dire situations. We see things like the breakdown of trust, paranoia spreading like wildfire, as well as uncharacteristic behavior driven by raw survival instincts. In these moments, the veneer of civility dissolves, revealing who these characters are when stripped of safety, comfort, and certainty. It's an unfiltered look at how fear reshapes people and how quickly morality can bend under pressure. And naturally, all of this leads to one of Umineko's most defining elements, the tension between truth and interpretation, and how the same events can fracture into wildly different realities depending on who is witnessing them. Umineko asks the question, what is truth? Is it objective reality? Or is it subjective experience? Umineko does a great job at pinning this theme to the forefront. It does so by capturing the hysteria that follows each murder, pushing characters to clash over theories and deduce who the culprit is, deny the validity of certain information or even entities, interpret the same events in wildly different ways, and cling stubbornly to beliefs they've already decided are true. Is reality just what is beholden to the whims of people? That would assume that there are multiple realities. Or is reality beholden to the law of nature and objectivity? That is what Umineko explores throughout the visual novel through both subtle and overt storytelling. My conclusion is firmly that reality is objective, but can be misunderstood depending on how different people interpret it. And the concept of interpretation is what Umineko weaponizes in order to exploit the fears, insecurities, questions, and sense of being of our characters. Our protagonist, Battler, has to confront this dilemma himself, fighting in a battle of the wits against Beatrice. It's a war to deny each other, to see what the truth is, beholden to the one whose interpretation of events is superior. And of course, we can't forget about the other theme that Umineko portrays, which is love. What does it mean to love someone? How far can one stretch the capacity of their affection to another, even if they've hurt them? Does love exist only to uncover hatred and morally corrupt you? Does it exist in order to separate man from sin? Does it provide strength to face the very things we wish to bury? Because without love, it cannot be seen. This is the message that echoes throughout the visual novel, one where we must figure out the meaning of. At some point, you might even wonder what genre Umineko really falls under, whether it's a murder mystery, psychological thriller, case study of human relationships, morality, or something else entirely. And with all that said, I'd like to reflect on how I'm feeling, especially where I'm at in the story. At this point where I'm at in the visual novel, I've felt so many emotions, but the one that feels the heaviest right now is conflicted. Of course, that comes after how I've become a detective, philosopher, and an absolute clown throughout my entire read. So much has happened up until this point, and a lot of my ideas have been for naught, while others still hold true, but with some degree of uncertainty. But beyond that, episode 4 has shown me many new perspectives compared to previous episodes, specifically about a certain character. It's a character I've been quite interested in, and that is Ushiromiya Rosa. To keep it simple, there are revelations that showcases the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as mentioned before, I've had to grapple with the fact that she's a very complex character. And as the case with many of our cast in Umineko, troubled, I have felt admiration, sympathy, sadness, and anger towards her. But it's not all entirely a bad thing. In fact, it makes me cheer her on even more. It's the relationship between Rosa and her daughter that is explored in episode 4 that has given me new perspective and tore at my heart. The way a character is able to make me feel this way is a testament to how the VN challenges my impressions of characters, events, and ideas. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to remain vague. Those who know exactly what I'm talking about. I have been invested in other characters such as Battler, Natsuhi, Shannon, and Kanon due to a combination of their convictions in the case of Battler, sense of duty, Natsuhi, and road to self-actualization, Shannon and Kanon. And of course, Rosa, due to a deep-seated inferiority complex as a result of her upbringing. Beyond that, I'm excited to see further where the mystery leads me, why the events of Rokunjima seems to be so polarizing, the truth behind the murders, and the nature of witches. So far, I've enjoyed the hell out of this visual novel, coming home and excited to read it every night for the past few months now. Even despite putting in more than 70 hours into this visual novel, I still feel like I don't know much, and perhaps that's intentional. The way the themes have developed, the depth and meaningful storytelling of our characters and lore have given me such an amazing experience. Despite the roller coaster of emotions I felt throughout, one stands clear. Umineko has been one of the most fun visual novels I've had the pleasure of playing, so I have no doubt in my mind that whatever comes next will not disappoint. And by the time I finish this VN, I really do believe it'll be a top 3 visual novel for myself. That's just how special it has become to me over the short span of time I've been reading it. And with all that said, I think it's worth stepping back and talking about why, despite its complexity, Umineko is absolutely worth experiencing for yourself. Treading near the end of the Questions arc, with the prospects of starting the Answers arc soon, I can say this. Umineko isn't passive entertainment. It demands you to think, reflect, question, theorize, and if you love stories that push you mentally and emotionally, this is absolutely worth diving into. Umineko is one of the few VNs I've read that leaves you with more questions than answers, at least for now. It's the type of game where you can theorize as much as you want, and no matter how close you believe you are in uncovering the truth, subverts that premise entirely. It leads you to conclusions, then strips it away, pulling you deeper into a void that seems ever expanding. If you enjoy games that pulls its narrative like this, giving you with the feeling of being tested, then this is definitely something you should check out. It's a visual novel made for active readers, rewarding them at every possible chance. Umineko is an emotional roller coaster, easily providing over 120 hours of read time, accompanied with writing depth that speaks to the soul. And after wrestling with its themes, characters, and contradictions, I can safely say that Umineko has left a much deeper impact on me than I ever anticipated, and I believe it'll do the same for you. In the end, Umineko has been so much more than a mystery for me. It's been an experience that challenged how I read stories, how I interpret people, and strengthened my resolve about truth itself. What started as a simple desire to play detective became a journey through layered perspectives, fractured realities, and deeply human emotions. From the chaos of Rokenjima to the quiet, painful moments between its characters, every twist has pushed me to question not just what's happening, but why it matters. And even though I'm only halfway through, I can already tell that Umineko is the kind of story that stays with you long after you close the game. A story that tests you, teaches you, and moves you in ways you don't expect. So, as I head into the Answers arc, I'm prepared to be wrong, to be surprised, and to keep searching for the heart buried beneath the mystery. And maybe, by the end, I'll finally understand what it means when they say, "Without love, it cannot be seen."